Hey, this is a video for people who were on the workshop with myself and Joan Blees earlier in the year. I promised to do some video tutorials for tips and tricks and how to refine some of your digital composites. This is one of the pictures we took of my friend Gerald. So we're in Lightroom. I'm just going to do some tweaks to the overall exposure first of all. So I'm just going to click to open the shadows rather than what I call wanging the slider. You're better clicking on shadows, highlights, and using the minus key, which will bring them down in a more precise manner. So I'm just bringing the highlights down 15 there, opening the shadows, and maybe lift the blacks 10, wee bit of clarity, and if you thought the highlights on the face were too bright, you can use an adjustment brush. So I'm brushing with the highlights down 34, and I'm just painting over Gerald's face there for the highlights to bring them down a bit. If you're happy with that, done. So just simply then send the picture into Adobe Photoshop. So in Adobe Photoshop now, as soon as you click on one of the selection tools, for instance the quick selection tool, this option becomes available up here, select and mask. This is new in Adobe Photoshop CC. You used to do a selection first and then click on what was called Refine Edge. I personally was a big fan of the Refine Edge tool, and I think this is a backward step so far in my experience, but maybe I just haven't learned how to use it properly. But what I have discovered is that you're better not making a selection here at all. You're better just going straight into select and mask. You have here the transparency button, and you would normally leave that up somewhere in the middle just so that you can see what you're trying to select. So up here the first tool is called the quick selection tool, and you can see by the size of the cursor there that I've got a quite small selection. If I make that bigger using the right brackets key, you can see that increase in size, so quite small. And I'm just going to draw this out over Gerald and bring it close to the edges. I mean, it's quite a remarkable little tool. So I'm just going to make it slightly smaller as I come up onto the face and the hair here. But you can see that at the size of Gerald's face there, where there are some straggly hairs, it has done quite a good job. And the area around the edge seems fine. You can here change this to overlay. That will allow you to see the problems here. So there are dark hairs that are not selected here. There are bits of white selected with the hairs, etc. So that is where you would then use this Refine Edge. And if I use the plus key just to come up, so I'm just going to go over the edges of Gerald's hair here and hope that the Refine Edge tool can do a better job of making the selection. So you just hope that it does what it says on the tin, refine the edge of what you have already selected. So I would normally recommend feathering what you have selected by maybe 1 pixel. You don't want to end up with too sharp an edge. And output would be to new layer with layer mask, and I'm just going to click OK on that. So this selection looks reasonably good, but you have to realise that we shot this against a light background, and part of the advice we gave you on the day was that if you're thinking of a composite where you're going to put somebody into a light background, then shoot them against a light background. If you're going to put them into a dark background, then shoot them against a darker background, and you'll see why that you're making your job easier So let's simply start then dragging this into a background. So if I click the move tool and just drag Gerald up to one of Joan's backgrounds, would be Pier. So there is Gerald dragged in, and you can see immediately that the straggly hairs have actually been, you know, that's quite a good job. You'd probably get away with that. But we're going to look at ways that we can refine it. So if you do have problems, one of the ways to fix it is to put in what I call a sandwich layer. So if you just click on the bottom layer and then click for a new blank layer, and what I would do is use the color dropper tool just to pick up quite a bright color in the sky. So we're in there somewhere, and just select that as the foreground color, and I would then go to the gradient tool. I would select from foreground color to transparent, and probably on the radial gradient tool, and I just click on the center of Gerald's face and drag that out to the right. And all that is doing is, now the opacity of this is 33%, so there's 2 clicks at 33%. Let's just turn this middle layer, this sandwich layer, on and off to see the effect. So if we double click on the magnifying tool to bring us in at 100%, you'll just see at the edges of Gerald's hair. That is because we shot him against the white background. If you put lighter background behind him, as I have just done, it helps the blend look much more natural. If that is not sufficient, another little trick is to click on the top layer, create another blank layer, right click and choose create clipping mask. This means that anything I do to this mask will only affect what is visible on the layer below. So I would now use the color picker to pick up a color of Gerald's hair, and B for brush, and I'm going to paint at about we'll go for 35% opacity, so I just hit 35 very quickly on the keyboard, and I'm now going to just, with a soft edged brush, I've put it in, I'm brushing in what's called darken mode, and I'm going to put the blending mode of this new blank layer into multiply, and as I just run over the edges of Gerald's hair, I'm just darkening the hairs that we've already selected. And the beauty of having this on a separate layer is that you can bring down the opacity of it. So I've hit 6 to reduce the opacity of that to 60%, and there's another little tweak to the hair, which has made that, I mean, for a very quick digital composite, that was really not that difficult. If you do have problems with the edges of, say, Gerald's leather jacket, if you're not happy with the edge, you just click on the mask and hit D for default, and that will make black and white your foreground colours. B for brush, and anything that you want to clean up. If you're painting in black, you will get rid of it. So if I hit X, I will make black my foreground colour. And for instance, I can, with a small soft edge brush, just click, and then I move the mouse and hold Shift and click. I should be painting at 100% opacity, so I've just hit 0 for 100% opacity. So I'm moving the mouse and holding the Shift key. You can see what that's doing is actually giving me a fairly soft edge on that, because I have a very soft edged brush. The harder the edge you want on your cutout, the harder the edge of your brush should be. So if I want that edge on the arm to be a sharper edge, I just go into the brush and maybe put a 70% hardness on the brush and Shift click, and you can see immediately I have given that edge of the the jacket a much sharper edge. If you don't like that, for instance, it's only a bit of leather, you just simply get rid of it. You can shape things as you want. So there you go. Once you have that done, the tip to blend all these layers is Shift Alt Command, or the shortcut rather is Shift Alt Command E, and that blends all the layers below into one layer above. You can then go into the likes of Filter, Nik software, Color FX Pro, and if you thought that the brightness or contrast or color temperature of your subject didn't match your background, you can use things like brilliance and warmth and just give it a wee bit of warmth or coldness as you see fit, but you're basically matching the highlights in the background to the highlights in the subject. So you can choose to either go warm or cold. I like the idea of cold maybe with this one, so we'll go minus 30 and click OK on that. So there's the brilliance warmth technique. And another little tip is that you can go into camera raw, so filter, camera raw filter, and you can do your vignetting, go into FX and do a post crop vignette, 35, click OK, and there you go. If you're happy with it, you can. I mean, I don't see a big point in saving these as layered files. I do save the cutout as a PSD file so that I can save it for other pictures, but I don't see the need to save this particular image, for instance, as a layered file. But that's all down to personal taste on the size of your hard drive. Okay, so I will come back with a couple more of these little tips and tricks, but that was a very simple digital composite, but yet you do have super selection of the hairs.